She kept quiet while her mother-in-law bullied her, poured dirty water on her, and mocked her son. But one day, the little boy opened his mouth, and what he said shook everyone. Let us find out what happened in this emotional and intriguing story. Before we begin, please, don't forget to subscribe for more touching and suspenseful African stories that speak straight to the heart. Chinaza just turned 20 when she got married to Uche. She didn't come from a rich home. Her mother sewed pap in the morning and roasted plantain in the evening. Her father had died long ago. But Chinaza was raised with respect, kindness, and a strong heart. She didn't have fancy things, but she could cook, clean, and smile even on her worst days. Uche loved her because of that smile. He met her while she was selling okpa near the motor park. She had offered him one free wrap when he forgot his wallet. From that day on, he kept coming back. Months later, he told his mother he had found a wife. But Mama Uche didn't like Chinaza. She's too ordinary, she said. No university, no class, no family name. Just village beauty and roadside manners. Still, Uche was stubborn. He married Chinaza in a simple traditional wedding. Her only jewelry was borrowed. The clothes they wore for their traditional marriage was from the money they both combined to buy a material and give a tailor to sew. But her smile was genuine, and her heart was full of hope. From the very first day she entered Uche's family house, Chinaza knew she was not welcome. Mama Uche didn't hide it. She would hiss loudly when Chinaza passed. She would complain that her food had no taste. Even when Chinaza swept the whole compound, Mama Uche would re-sweep the same spot and say, "You didn't do it well." At first, Chinaza stayed quiet. She believed that if she kept being kind, her mother-in-law would warm up to her. She cooked early, greeted everyone with respect, and tried her best. But the more she tried, the worse things became. Then one morning, everything changed. Chinaza discovered she was pregnant. She smiled, thinking maybe this child would bring peace between her and Mama Uche. Maybe a grandchild would soften the older woman's heart. But could she be right? Let's find out. When Chinaza told Uche she was pregnant, he lifted her off the ground and danced with her in their tiny room. They laughed, cried, and thanked God. For the first time since they got married, hope filled their little space. But when Uche told his mother, her face didn't change. She didn't smile. She didn't even ask if Chinaza was okay. She just said, "Let's hope the child looks like our side of the family." Then she walked out of the room. From that day, things got worse. Mama Uche began to throw hurtful words. She would say things like, "In my time, women gave birth in the farm and returned to work the same day. Now you're walking around with pregnancy like you carried the world." Chinaza kept silent. Even when she vomited in the morning, even when her legs swelled, even when she was too tired to stand, she still cooked, cleaned, and washed Mama Uche's clothes. Uche tried to defend her, but he was the only son. His words never held water. "I'm your mother." Mama Uche would shout. "Are you choosing your wife over me?" When the baby boy was born, Chinaza held him in her arms with tears in her eyes. He had tiny fingers, soft cheeks, and eyes just like Uche's. They named him Somtechuku, praise God with me. It was a name full of thanksgiving, chosen because after everything she had endured, this child was her joy. But Mama Uche didn't touch the child. She stood far away, arms folded. "This one looks like her people," she murmured. No much family celebration. Just a simple naming party. When visitors came, she told them, "We don't know if the child is truly ours yet. Let's watch first." Chinaza heard it. Her heart broke. But she didn't fight. She pressed her lips and fed her baby. Even when Mama Uche refused to help her during the baby's naming week, Chinaza carried on. Her own mother came from the village with pap and firewood, just to support her daughter quietly. Everyone in the compound watched. Some pitied her. Others shook their heads. But Chinaza said nothing. Samtechukwu turned too, and the house became both louder and heavier. He was a sharp, cheerful child, always curious and full of questions. But even as he played, his small eyes began to notice what many grown-ups refused to say out loud. By now, Chinaza's mother had gone back to the village. She had stayed for a few weeks after Samto was born, helping with cooking and caring for her daughter. But she was a widow and had a small farm to tend to. Before leaving, she held Chinaza's hands and said, "No matter what, protect your peace and protect your child." But peace was far from the compound. Mama Uche's insults never slowed down. If Chinaza made okra soup, she would say, "So slimy. Did you cook this with snail mucus?" If it was egusi, she would say, "You call this soup? My dogs ate better than this." One morning, Chinaza cooked a fresh pot of nsole soup, Uche's favorite. Mama Uche lifted the lid, sniffed it, and without a word, carried the entire pot and poured it into the gutter. Chinaza stared in shock, holding Samto in her arms. "You want to poison my son with this nonsense?" Mama Uche shouted. Later that week, Chinaza sat in the compound helping Samto write simple letters in the sand. The boy giggled as he wrote them for mommy. But Mama Uche came out with a bowl of soapy water and, without warning, splashed it all over the letters. And on Chinaza's wrapper. "You've turned my compound into a useless school," she barked. "When you could be pounding yam for your husband." Samto started crying. Chinaza pulled him close and said nothing. Uche saw all these things. Sometimes, he stayed silent. Other times, he pulled his mother aside and whispered, "Mama, please stop. She's trying." But Mama Uche would yell back, "You are bewitched. This girl has used food to blind you." Uche loved his wife, but he was the only son. And because he is the only son, he is trapped between love for his wife and respect for his mother. He was stuck, unsure of how to keep peace without breaking loyalty. Still, Samtechukwu noticed everything. One day, when Mama Uche shouted at Chinaza in front of visitors, Samto stood up and shouted back, "Stop shouting at my mommy." The compound went silent. The visitors stared. Even Mama Uche blinked in shock. Something was shifting, and none of them were ready for what was coming next. Mama Uche's sickness came like a thief in the night. At first, it was her legs. They started to swell, slowly at first, then painfully. She limped around the compound, complaining of heaviness and itching. Everyone thought it was just old age. She refused to go to the clinic. "I'm fine," she snapped at Uche. "It's just more stress." But within a week, she couldn't walk. Her voice became weak. Her appetite disappeared. And her insults, they stopped. Suddenly, the woman who once walked around the house like a queen could no longer leave her bed. Chinaza was the one who noticed first. Uche was out at work. The other tenants in the compound stayed away, nobody wanted trouble. Chinaza stood at her doorway that morning, holding a broom, when she heard a soft voice call, "Noza, please help me sit up." It was Mama Uche. At first, Chinaza didn't move. She just stood there, staring. The woman who had mocked her cooking, splashed her with water, and humiliated her in front of neighbors, was now too weak to lift her own wrapper. But Chinaza wasn't raised like that. She dropped the broom, walked over quietly, and helped the older woman sit up. She brought warm water. She changed her wrapper. She cooked plain pap and fed her with a spoon. Samtechukwu followed her around, carrying a small cup of water like a helper. "Mommy, is Grandma sick?" he asked. "Yes, my son." "So we must be kind," Chinaza said gently. For days, Chinaza took care of her mother-in-law like a nurse. Morning and night. Sponge baths. Fresh soup. Soft pillows. And not once did she bring up the past. One afternoon, as Chinaza massaged her swollen legs, Mama Uche began to cry. "I treated you like a slave," she whispered. "But you're more of a daughter to me than I ever deserved." Chinaza said nothing. She just wiped the tears. When Uche came back from work and saw the scene, his sick mother resting peacefully, his wife gently holding her hand, he quietly sat beside them. For the first time in years, there was no shouting in the house. After weeks of caring for Mama Uche, Chinaza found a strange kind of peace in the house. The same woman who once poured her soup into the gutter now asked gently for hot water to bathe. The woman who used to hiss at the sound of her voice now sat quietly, listening to her hum lullabies to some techuku. But even in that peace, Chinaza never forgot the pain. It lived quietly in her chest, not as anger, but as a memory. Uche became more present too. He came home early. He helped bathe Somto. He started asking Chinaza, "Are you okay?" The walls that once divided them now seemed thinner. Sometimes, at night, they talked, really talked, like two people learning each other again. Then one Saturday morning, a visitor came. He was an elderly man, dressed in native wear, with a walking stick and a gentle smile. Uche greeted him with a deep bow. "Uncle Ebuka." Uche said. "You didn't tell us you were coming." The man was Uche's late father's elder brother, a man who lived in the next town, but rarely visited. He had heard from a neighbor that Mama Uche was ill and came to see things for himself. He didn't stay long before he began to ask questions. Who's taking care of her? Where are her daughters? Why is your wife looking so lean? Then, as if something inside him clicked, he said, "Uche, come. Let me speak with you man to man." They went outside and sat under the mango tree. Chinaza stayed inside, feeding Somto, pretending not to listen. But she could hear enough. "You let your mother control your home too much," Uncle Ebuka said. "You know how she is. She fought your cousin's wives. She even fought your auntie once. You should have stood up for your family earlier." "I didn't know how to manage it," Uche said. "I just wanted peace." "There's no peace in silence," the uncle replied. "You protect peace by doing what's right." That night, Uche came inside, sat beside Chinaza, and for the first time, apologized. "I should have protected you more," he said. "You've suffered too much in silence." Chinaza didn't respond right away. She simply nodded and looked down at Somto sleeping peacefully between them. For the first time, Uche held both of them in his arms, not just as a husband and father, but as a man who finally saw clearly. But there was one more moment left. One moment that would seal everything, and it would come from Mama Uche herself. Mama Uche sat on a plastic chair in the compound, wrapped in two old shawls, her feet resting on a stool. She had grown thinner. Her voice was not as sharp. Her hands trembled when she held a cup. But her eyes, they were different. Softer. Wiser. Tired. Chinaza came out with a bowl of warm yam porridge, gently placed it in her lap, and said, "Mama, try and eat." Mama Uche looked up and held her gaze. "Thank you," she said quietly. They were only 2 words. But coming from her, they carried the weight of years. Chinaza nodded, then turned to check on Somto, who was playing quietly under the tree, drawing lines in the sand. Later that evening, as the compound quieted and Uche returned from work, Mama Uche asked to speak with them both. Chinaza and Uche sat on the veranda while Somto curled up and dozed off nearby. "I want to say something," she began. Her voice cracked with weakness, but her words were clear. "I did not treat you well, Chinaza. I made your life hard. I said things a mother should never say to her son's wife. Uche looked down, ashamed. Chinaza stared at her quietly. Mama, Uche continued, you could have hated me. You could have let me suffer. But you gave me food, water, and care. Even when I gave you nothing but pain. She paused, then added, you are not just a good wife. You are the daughter I never knew I needed. Chinaza blinked quickly, tears threatening to fall. Uche reached for her hand. Then Mama Uche looked at Somto. That boy, she said, pointing with trembling fingers, he has your heart, Chinaza. One day, he will stand before many people, and they will listen. Because you taught him to love even when you had every reason to hate. Years later, those words would ring true. Because Somtechukwu grew up into a kind, wise, and outspoken young man. He studied hard, earned scholarships, and became a public speaker known for standing up for women, for fairness, for peace in families. His most popular speech opened with these words, I was raised by a woman who was once bullied in silence. And still chose kindness. Moral of the story, some battles are not fought with fists, but with quiet strength, patience, and love. In a world where hate can grow easily, it takes real courage to respond with grace. And sometimes, the ones who hurt us the most, are the ones we end up healing. Thank you for staying with us to the end. See you next time.